What do skin cancer, the ozone layer, northern lights, and my cell phone have in common? Dr. Ed Stander is here to tell us all about that this week on the Science and Education segment on Impact. Welcome to the Science and Education segment on Impact. I'm Barbara Brabetz. My guest today is Dr. Edward Stander, geologist, astronomist extraordinaire, back for another time at in the Impact Studios.
Can't have too many, that's for sure.
Well, certainly not. We're going to talk today about a little bit of everything. The heavens, what's in the heavens, what's going on, and how it impacts everybody in their everyday life.
That's why the show's called Impact?
Yes.
Excellent. We're all set.
So let's start first with recent activity in the sun. The sun is kind of acting funny. It's predictable, but still kind of comical. So could you explain what's going on with our sun right now?
All right. The sun is undergoing a switch of poles. The North Pole is becoming the South Pole, and the South Pole is becoming the North Pole.
So it has poles just like our planet?
Just like the Earth, and it doesn't all just switch all of a sudden like that, but it's inside the planet, someplace inside the sun. There's something that says time to switch. It does it every 11 years. And when it does, it sets up a whole bunch of situations, if you will, where all of a sudden it gets a little bit hotter in the center. You start getting more circulation going out towards the edges, and you get more sunspots. It gets start getting solar flares, and the next thing you know, we're getting hit by garbage from the sun coming out and smashing the Earth. Well,
before we get to the garbage that's hitting the Earth, let's talk about this phenomenon where a switch of the poles can make such huge changes that we can perceive them here on Earth. How far away is the sun from where we are right now?
It's about 93 million miles.
93 million miles.
93 million miles.
When light travels from the sun to Earth, about how long does it take to get here?
About 8 minutes.
So whether it's sunlight or whether it's X-rays, it's about an 8-minute journey?
Yeah,
so
they're all the same. So it takes 8 minutes to get from the sun to the Earth, and then every once in a while, stuff from the sun gets blasted out as well, and that usually takes 3 or 4 days to get here as well.
So what is a sunspot?
It's a part of the sun that's a little bit colder than the sun itself, believe it or not.
So you think of the sunspot as like a hot spot.
It actually is, but it's colder. Since it's colder, it looks darker compared to the sun.
Oh.
The sun's about 5,600 degrees, and the sunspot's about 3,000.
Now we think of the sun as way super hot, gonna melt everything, but 5,000 degrees isn't that hot. So what's really going on there?
What's happening is in the center of the sun, there's an area where the little atoms, there's an atom here and an atom here, and they're squeezing together because of all the pressure and the temperature, and they're starting to rub with each other, which makes it even hotter. And they get closer and closer and closer, and then they become one. And when they become one, they let off a certain amount of energy, usually as light, and then that light goes from the center of the sun up towards the edges. Guess how long it takes for that little bit of light that forms to get out to the edge of the sun?
Oh, well, it's 8 minutes from the sun to here, right. So let's say 4 minutes.
That would be a huge sun, wouldn't it?
Well, still, maybe it's got, to stop for a coffee and then, check its email.
It stops for a lot of coffees. It takes about 200,000 years for that little bit of sunlight to get out of the sun.
So we have an internal part of the sun,
right,
where all the action's going on, and that's much, much hotter than the sun that we draw on our second grade yellow sun with waves coming out of it.
If that little thing on the paper was that hot, the paper would burn, yes. So that doesn't happen. No, the center of the sun's about 10 million degrees.
Oh, that's more like it. That's more sun-like.
That's sun-like. And as the stuff comes out, it gets gobbled up by electrons along the way and then shot back out into space in different directions. It takes about 200,000 years for that light in the center to get out to the edge. And every time it gets gobbled up by an electron and gets shot off, it loses a bit of energy, which is good because that original light beam that's inside there, did you see it there? Is actually made up of gamma rays. And as it works its way out and loses energy, it goes from a gamma ray to an X-ray to an ultraviolet to visible light, and then it finally gets out.
So we think of our light that we see, and we call it visible light. That's our Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. The stuff that the hydrogen to helium conversion, that's cosmic rays. That's not stuff we can see at all, and we certainly don't want to be around it.
No, you don't want to be around it. Because if we were hit by cosmic rays, then we'd all turn green, as you probably know.
Well, I've seen that B movie for sure.
Yeah.
But we are being hit by cosmic rays.
Some, but not many.
Okay.
Because the vast majority of them get transmogrified from cosmic rays to Roy G. Biv waves, which is the #1 thing that comes out of the sun.
So still, our sun is essentially glowing in the visible spectrum, even though all that other stuff inside is different.
It's glowing in everything. I mean, X-rays come out of it. Ultraviolet rays, of course, come out of it, because if you're sitting in the sun for too long, you'll end up getting sunburned, and that's the ultraviolet. And then you've got the visible, and it's also producing microwaves and radio waves as well.
So we have all of this going on, all of this so-called radiation, not like uranium radiation, but light radiation coming out.
Right.
We love the sun because it makes things grow and allows us to be a little warmer than the moon. But what is going on with the sunspots? What happens when we have a sunspot that then turns into something else, like a coronal mass ejection? This sounds dangerously dirty, but it's really something that the sun does.
Well, those sunspots are places where magnetic fields come out from the sun and then go up and onto the other side. So one of the sunspots is positive, one of the sunspots is negative. And it effectively sends out electromagnetic waves. And sometimes the material from the sun gets caught into this electromagnetic wave and forms what's called a solar flare. And this is what shoots off into space and comes to us about 3 days later, hits our atmosphere, and we get auroras.
Now, there are scientists that monitor the sun daily. There's a special satellite that we have looking at the sun at all times?
Well, we have a number of them. SOHO is one of them, TRACE is another. There's about a dozen different satellites now in different places that look at the sun from different directions. We can actually see the back of the sun.
Really?
We have a satellite back there that can see the back of the sun, so we know what's going on at all times.
So what are they looking for? Why spend all that time and energy monitoring the sun when we can just look up and see it? What are those satellites telling us?
Well, partially they're telling us what's going on inside the sun, so we get some idea of what to expect in the near future. Some of them tell us, for example, whether a solar flare is coming, because solar flares can push the envelope of the Earth a little bit too close. It can wipe out satellites, can kill people in spacecrafts. It can produce problems on Earth when all of a sudden the power goes out.
So we have this arc, and then perhaps the solar flare comes off of that, and we have stuff coming towards us. What is that stuff?
That stuff is high energy protons. It's material with a lot of energy. Any one of those things, if it were to hit a fluorescent light, would turn it on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there's billions of these coming out at the same time. And what protects us is what's called the radiation belt around the Earth and the magnetic field. And just as they are sent off from the sun by a magnetic field, when they get into the Earth's magnetic field, they get attracted to the north and south poles, which is why you get auroras in those areas. And the center of the Earth is pretty well protected.
So northern lights, we can expect them a couple of days after a solar flare?
You can go on to a webpage called spaceweather.com and actually see what's coming. And we'll show you pictures of it.
Not only that, they give them names, like numbers.
Yeah,
so CME 1492 is headed our way. And then it takes a few days, not just that 8 minutes, because it's got stuff to it, right?
I call them all Frank.
Frank?
They're all very similar.
Yes.
Right. But basically the same thing.
So beyond the solar flares hitting the Earth and creating an aurora,
right,
and maybe turning on a light bulb if one was hanging in space, what kind of effects do we feel here in Schenectady, Albany, Troy?
Well, as I say, every 11 years it gets stronger than normal. That's called the solar maximum. We just came off what's called the solar minimum, and the solar minimum we just came off is one of the deepest that they've ever recorded. There were something like 800 or 900 days without even a sunspot on the sun. So
really boring at spaceweather.com for that time.
It was horrible. I mean, I bought a solar telescope and never got to use it.
Ugh.
So anyway, we're coming up right now. We're peaking up in 2013 to the solar maximum, when the greatest number of these flares will be coming, because the sun is changing over its poles from north to south to north, and that produces processes in the center of the sun that cause the flares to occur.
So if we go to spaceweather.com, we might actually see something on the face of the sun. We certainly don't want to look at the sun, and we can't really see sunspots usually with a naked eye, and certainly it's dangerous.
Yep.
But what about all the other stuff that gets affected by solar flares or by these X-rays or cosmic rays? We can't do anything about the cosmic rays that hit us.
No.
What about electronics? I've heard stories that that's why my cell phone drops out every once in a while, that it might be a solar flare.
Well, it can knock out satellites because it's so high energy. It can knock out what's called the ozone layer. It can actually do damage to that. It can knock out the radiation belt by overcharging it. It can knock out this layer that's around the Earth that allows radio frequencies to skip. For example, sometimes I'm sitting in a car with an AM radio and I can pick up a radio broadcast from Russia. And there's no way that that broadcast would get here otherwise. But what it does is it goes out into space, skips along the ozone layer and the radiation belt, and then comes down to me where I am. And it'll totally destroy that. So people who count for shortwave broadcast, for example, lose the ability to do that. I was up north one year where we desperately had to get help because one of the people I was with was hurt. And it was during the time of an aurora. We couldn't get anybody for 3 days. So we finally signaled a passing airplane with one of these devices you're not supposed to actually fire off unless an airplane goes down to get help in. But that's a major problem. People up north lose the ability to communicate with each other.
So these things could happen with all of our modern day communications, and of course
because of our modern day communications.
Oh, yeah.
In the old days when everything was landline, there was no problem.
But now we're not all just copper wire. We're microwaves here and there, and we're satellite dependent.
Yeah.
And somebody might not be able to see a Yankees game because
heaven forbid,
because there's been an X-ray burst.
And every once in a while, a couple of years ago, the entire northeast of the United States went out because that extra energy went into a transformer and blew it, and it knocked out the entire East Coast.
So, I mean, if you want to talk about the apocalypse, and there's plenty of apocalypse movies out there, we have some remote options with Solar Max. Like we might have our power grid go down. God forbid I can't check my email. Oh my God. I might. But the space station, they could lose some power. That would certainly put them in jeopardy.
Yep.
So
it's a major problem for them.
What can we do about it?
You can block the sun. Put a big lead shield around the sun, perhaps. I'm sure the Army Corps of Engineers has come up with a lot of ways of doing it. But generally speaking, it's like trying to control the weather, or my wife for that matter.
Oh boy.
There's not much you can do. So you have to accept it when it comes.
We have that on tape.
Okay.
Okay. You don't think your wife's controllable?
Fortunately, we don't have television.
Well, to wrap it up, are you looking forward to Solar Max, or are you waiting for solar boredom?
I've got this telescope that I haven't used for years, and as soon as Solar Max comes up and it starts going on the radio and television, eBay goes crazy. So I'll sell it and make a fortune. That's what I'm looking for.
And then buy another one during solar minimum?
Solar minimum, exactly.
Well, let's transition just a little bit. The sun has also been in the news lately because Venus took a very interesting trek across the surface of the sun.
Yeah, how exciting.
What did we call that? What was it?
It's called the Venus Transit.
Venus Transit. It sounds like, like a board game or a music group. Venus Transit.
It was very important in the 1600s. Don't get me wrong. It was in the 1700s. It was important. There was a group, for example, who was trying to figure out whether the Earth was round, and they were down in Quito, Ecuador. And the only way they could align their clocks with the clocks in France was to wait for that to happen, because where it happens at the same, of course, because it's from the sun. When the Venus goes across the face of the sun, as soon as it touches, you can mark the time exactly.
Oh.
They tried to figure out the size of the solar system by using it back in the 1600s. Captain Cook, one of his reasons for his trip around the Earth was to be in Tahiti to be able to see it happen. But nowadays, it's more of just a social phenomenon than anything. I saw it in 2004 as it went across the sun, and I said, boy, that was really exciting.
And how about in 2012?
In 2012, I saw it for about 15 minutes, and I said, gee, it looks like the same thing. It's sort of like a dot going across a big white thing.
Boy, it takes a lot to entertain you, Dr. Stander.
I'm well beyond it now.
Will you stick around and we'll do part 2 of this, and we'll talk about how other planets may be more exciting than Venus's transit across the sun?
Only if you buy me a cup of coffee.
Okay, we can certainly do that on our Open Stage Media budget. Yes. Okay. So, all right. Well, then we're going to wrap it up for today, and we'll continue this next week. I'm Barbara Brabetz. This is you're Ed Stander, all right. And this has been the Science and Education segment on Impact.
Well, that's it for Impact for this week. I'm Nick Barber, your host. Remember, we love to hear from you, so contact us by email at impact@proctors.org. And this is the 4th of July week, so enjoy yourselves, have fun, and stay safe. All of us from Impact wish you a happy 4th of July holiday. Thanks for watching. I'm Nick Barber, your host, and we'll see you next week on Impact.
Proctors, bringing the best in arts, education, and entertainment.